Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Moore. This is the Health Tech Edge, where we explore how technology is reshaping healthcare, not in theory, but in practice. Today's guest has spent her career helping women improve their health and fertility outcomes. Kirsten Kchmer is the founder and CEO of Conceivable, a company using AI to personalize women's health, fertility, and wellness care. We'll talk about how she's turning decades of clinical experience into an AI powered care team, why tracking data alone isn't enough, and how her team is using technology to create real, measurable improvements in women's health. Kirsten, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That was one of the best intros I ever heard.
Oh, well, it's you've got quite a career already that you've achieved and kind of the impact that you've made in women's health and the mission that you and the team are set out on at Conceivable, I think is noteworthy, which is why we're excited to have you for a guest today.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to talk about it.
So let's actually go back in time a little bit and talk about your experience prior to Conceivable. There's obviously some work that you've been doing up until this point in your career or when you launched Conceivable that kind of prepared you for this, based on what I've learned about you. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, kind of how you got here and what precipitated the start of Conceivable?
Sure. Well, I was a linguist in my first career and then got diagnosed with MS. And through a series of great interactions with some amazing clinicians, I came across an acupuncturist, and the acupuncturist explained my MS to me in a way that was so different than any doctor had before. He was like, basically, look, MS wasn't even, 3,000 years ago when we started thinking about medicine. We didn't have names for the conditions that people had. We just looked at the symptom patterns. And what we can see from your MS presentation is that literally you're so exhausted. I had been overtraining. I was a gymnast for so long. And he's like, our job is to get your body stronger than your disease. And then that's what he did. And I ended up, going into remission for about 30 years. And because of that, I ended up, going to acupuncture college and sort of fell in love with the menstrual cycle, which is probably I'm the only person ever in the history of the universe to ever say that. But it is for any clinician, if you aren't getting full details on every aspect of a woman's menstrual cycle, you are missing out on so much free data. Free, robust data that indicates what are the real underlying, well, before we even worry about the disease presentation, like what are the foundational facts of health and wellness that are still not working, and how do we repair those?
Which is fascinating because my wife and I have three children, and sometimes we have two girls and a boy. So we notice things about their behavior, especially our son, who's our youngest. We kind of learned girls, right, and kind of how to parent them, and then boys. But part of it is there are some, I believe, those natural tendencies that were built in and kind of wired into us for thousands and thousands of years, right? Like young men being risk takers or whatever it is, right? Like there's kind of some just natural things that are baked in. And so that might be some of the things, right? Like you can try to understand it using modern thinking, but if you attribute it to the kind of things that are wired into us as Homo sapiens, right? Like there's just some things that don't make sense, or that we're trying still to understand, over thousands of years. So you had the experience applying acupuncture to women and kind of helping along fertility and all of that. I think you say that you've helped more than 10,000 couples improve their fertility, which is amazing achievement just in and of itself. How do you think about that now as you launch Conceivable and kind of founded this company with the mission? And why don't you talk, actually, before we get into that, let's just talk, what is Conceivable, just so people understand kind of what you're doing today.
Yes. So Conceivable is a response to something. Can I just, I would love to explain just like why we
Yeah,
went from being clinicians to Conceivable, and then I'll explain
absolutely.
Conceivable, because I think without knowing the back part, it makes it, you think, why would you do that? So we had 3 clinics in 3 cities. We had 20 acupuncturists working for us, extremely great success rates, and really proud of the fact that we had treated, over 10,000 infertile couples, helped them. And then a study came out in 2015 or 16, and that showed that less than 3% of couples could afford fertility treatments. And when I read that, I felt kind of sick. I cried a little bit. And I was just like, I have left in the last 25 years so many women in the dirt. So many women needed other resources. And so I was like, how can we democratize access to women's health, starting with infertility? And so literally I had no idea, because I was like, I don't want more acupuncturists. It's not a way to, it's too hard to get consistency. I don't want more commercial real estate. It never occurred to me that you could use technology to do this. But we built a first version of an app that was designed to be a digital twin of me. So everything that I would do, because when we talk about acupuncture, acupuncture is one of the tools that an acupuncturist uses, but an acupuncturist is actually a doctor of Chinese medicine. So they should have a bunch of tools in their toolkit, things that, diet, lifestyle, behavioral health, those kinds of things. So we built, a first version of this with the goal of like, could we build a piece of software that would be 50% as effective as the real deal, is going to acupuncture, and the whole experience, the human interaction, all of that. And then the shocking results were that actually the AI was better than me. And that was the point in which I sold my clinics. I was shocked because we call her Kirsten AI. And the data scientist came in and he seemed kind of like not that excited. I said, "Oh, did you finish?" And he says, "Yeah." And I said, "It didn't work, did it?" He goes, "No, no, it definitely worked." And I was like, "Well, did she get close to me?" Because I was the control group, right? And he said, "No." And I was like, "Oh, man." Because all I wanted was her to be 50% as good as me. And he goes, "No, but you got close to her."
Wow.
And I was like, "What? That's not possible. I'm me." And he goes, "No, she outperformed you." And there's a really important takeaway. A really important takeaway. When we are going for a service like therapy, acupuncture, massage, any of these services that can be really helpful and beneficial, we go once a week or once every other week or even once a month. But then the rest of that time in between, we go back to living our lives in the same way. And what we're able to identify is literally 80% of what's going on with women's health across the whole reproductive life cycle can be tied back to epigenetic factors like modifiable diet, lifestyle, behavioral health factors. And we were able to validate that in a strategic way to modify them can produce, exponential improvements, not only in health, but in fertility outcomes. So now we
Yeah.
just expanded it just one more part. So then just what we expanded is, instead of just having Kai, you have a whole virtual care team: therapist, chef, nutritionist, data scientist, tongue analyzer, acupuncturist. And you can interact with each of those care teams for whatever you need every single day, all day long, for, almost nothing, $15 a month.
And who's the target for that monthly subscription? Who are obviously women, but is there any kind of specific that you think are ideal users?
In this first version of the app, it is where we are right now in this vertical, because basically it's an operating system instead of just an app. The app would be one experience, one directional. So right now the focus is fertility, but in the next 6 months we'll be spreading out into pregnancy, miscarriage, postpartum, all of those things. And so right now it's best for any woman who is trying to get or stay pregnant at any place in that journey, whether she's like thinking about, like women will say, "I'm getting married, next month, and I want to, or in 6 months, and I want to get ready because I'm older and I want to get pregnant right away." That's a really good place to start, because for almost no investment, right, you can start optimizing everything. You'll feel better to help you cope with your stress of the wedding planning, versus maybe you're 39 years old and you're getting ready for an IVF cycle. You can do everything that we would have done in our clinic on the app for, a fraction of it. And again, because when you would come to my clinic for acupuncture, I'd give you acupuncture and I say, "Hey, you don't have very much bleeding. You only have 1 day of bleeding. We need to build up the lining so we can support implantation once we get that fertilized embryo. Make sure to eat lots of iron-rich foods, foods with B12." No, now the app is like, looks at every single thing that could possibly work against her, figures out the nutrition she needs, makes the menus each week to match that. And then she's tracking it. So she's saying, "I ate this," or if she ate something different, she can just snap a picture of it. So that way the app is interacting with her. "Oh, it's getting towards the end of the week. I'm seeing we only have, we haven't had enough protein this week. We need to whatever."
Which is, I think, part of the opportunity with AI. And I've told a story on the podcast before about a loved one recently having a health crisis and a hospital stay and a rehab stay. And throughout all of it, I was using ChatGPT which is obviously a great tool, but it's general purpose. It has a wide, array of knowledge. There is medical knowledge in there, but I was feeding it kind of every conversation, every test result, every symptom, everything, and then asking it questions. And can you take this and reformat it in an update that I can share with my mother, who's 75, and she's with it, like she gets it, but I want to simplify things. Can you give me an update I can share with my sister, who's a couple of states away, right? We were able to use it as that 24/7 expert health coach, with deep medical knowledge, deep clinical knowledge, right? Drugs, interactions, potential side effects, all those kind of things, to brainstorm ideas, to give us more to go back to the care team with, and the human side of it. Um, when I hear you talk about what you're doing, it's a similar kind of thing in that you're putting yourself on duty as well as a full care team for your clients who are now using an app instead of coming into the clinic, but you're available 24/7 and with not just that wide array of knowledge, but I think what you must have done in Conceivable is you're starting to kind of put deeper knowledge in specific subject areas into each of these virtual care team members to make them specialists in their area, so they really have depth to go along with the needs of what your clients are kind of working with them on. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, each agent is trained basically how I would approach it, because for 25 years I have a sense of like what will make the biggest difference. But then more importantly, the one of the pieces of the secret sauce is like at the beginning we collect a bunch of information from the user. Then the user is tracking theoretically everything that she's doing and not doing. She's interacting with the AI or her agents. Then all of that information is being organized and analyzed all the time. So in most trackers, it just says you got 1,000 steps and you had 2,000 calories, whatever. What our secret sauce is the ability to analyze all of that in a systems approach, so that then you can reverse engineer that system to determine what needs to, be recommended to improve it. And it's learning. So the AI, instead of like if you go to GPT and you say, like I was using a GPT therapy prompt because I was saying, oh, I want a mentor. And then I saw this prompt on TikToks like, this is the best mentoring. So I was like trying it. It was a session that I would have paid $1,000 for it. That's how good the prompt was. And working through that. And so what we want to make sure is that the AI is saying like, oh, well, this person isn't drinking enough water. So she's making a recommendation. Then maybe the user isn't doing it. Then she's going back, she's talking to the user about, hey, what's going on with the water thing? Are you forgetting? Do we need a behavioral intervention? Are you not thirsty, which would be a clinical sign? And then learning so that every single user is not only feeding information into the algorithm, then the algorithm is testing, right? Does this work in this situation? And it's refining its ability to make recommendations with more and more accuracy and a precision that support better outcomes.
Yeah, which I think that's the expertise and the way that the interaction happens between the user and the agents in the app is really key to, especially because it's something that, I mean, anything health related, but I would think that women and women's health, it's incredibly personal, the information and kind of what they're sharing. And so there has to be, I would think, and sometimes AI gets criticized for being overly kind of fluffy and empathetic and complimentary and all that stuff. How do you think about that when you work with your team on kind of the development of the AI and kind of the voice and the tone and the way that it interacts? What's the right balance to strike in kind of what you found?
Well, we trained it on my voice. I had thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of consultations, of presentations, all kinds of things. We basically trained it on my voice. And and sort of the tone and the flavor is sort of your cool old aunt who, probably smokes weed and is the life of the party at Thanksgiving because she's the only one that doesn't have that much baggage, but that you can go to for anything and she's going to give you the straight dope. She'll probably cuss a lot. I mean, the app doesn't cuss, but that's sort of like this vibe that it's like, having a health issue isn't fun. It doesn't have to be heavy. It doesn't have to be clinical. How can we the most important thing is that we message and communicate with her in a way that she can receive it and find it valuable enough to make a little change, because every little change compounds into another change, into another change, into another change. And that's kind of the thing that's most interesting. So if we're over indexed on words of affirmation, I'm totally fine with that. I think all of us My AI is so supportive, and it does tell me that I'm extremely smart all the time, and I do. But you know what? Every day, all of us get so much information about how we're not enough. If you just fill in the blank, if only I was not, or if only I was more, everybody's has a list forever. Unless we're telling people you're doing a great job when they're not doing anything, this I don't believe in, but we can still find lots of ways to be extremely supportive and emotionally supportive of exactly where somebody is on their journey.
Yeah, I think that's an important note. Like, my wife is a nurse, and she's a school nurse specifically, and so she'll come home and, without breaching confidentiality of anyone, she'll tell me a story about something that day, and oftentimes I say to her, and this kind of it hits me kind of as a kid, just the way that I grew up. Like I say, like you may be the only adult that they interacted with today who genuinely expressed care and concern for them,
Oh,
right? Which is the unfortunate reality of just kind of what, and then there's a kind of loneliness epidemic that is being talked about in the world and studied in media and everything. And I think part of the worry that people have about AI and kind of character AI and some of the products that are out there is that AI relationships might take over, kind of filling that void of human friendships that are lacking, and that people rely maybe a little bit too much on these AI characters, or in a care team kind of scenario like you're building there. How do you think about that, and kind of what do you, again, how do you guide your team as you're kind of working on the development, and kind of strike that balance so that you're being a important member of that person's health journey, but maybe not kind of going over a line of where they're going to rely too much, or it's going to be kind of confusing for them.
that's a really good question, and we think about it a lot because unfortunately, if you're a female listening to this and you've been to the gynecologist, it's just, and it's not their fault. Like they only get 10 or 15 minutes with you. So it's just impossible that they can actually serve you in the way that you want to be served, and that they have the time and resources to really listen and empathize. And so unfortunately, currently in health, the AI is so much better than the human experience. Do you know what I mean? And but at the same time, building human relationships is a skill. And I think that our young people are starting to really lose that skill. So many of my friends my kids are 20 and 22. And, so many of my friends, we just see that our kids want to stay home so much more than we did. And, they're connecting through their phones and, through Snapchat and things like that. But it still isn't the same. Even if they're connecting with their friends, it's still not an in-person communication. So, I think that this is one of the things that it's one of the risks of AI and one of the benefits, and we'll only really know this problem and how to handle it as we navigate into it if we do it with care and concern.
Yeah, I definitely, my kids are about the same age. I've got one who's going to turn 26 next month, which I can't believe that she's that old and that I'm that old, and then we got a 23-year-old, and then we have our 18-year-old. But I remember, I think it was one of the times, leading up to the end of the school year when my son was graduating and walking into our dining room, and he's at the table with four of his friends, which is great that they're together. And every single one of them was heads down on their phone, looking at Snapchat or whatever they were doing. And like for several minutes, not like I caught them in the one moment, right? So like even when they're together, they're not together. They're kind of
They're like
uh,
parallel play.
yeah, yeah, it's fascinating. So I think the long-term implications, as you say, are going to be something that we'll have to monitor and study, right? And see, there is an opportunity, I think, for these AI agents, and these virtual relationships, if you want to call them that, to fill a void, to help people to be better versions of themselves in real life, but only if they're going out and kind of getting the interactions. And sometimes it's a confidence. It's a very there's a professor, Jonathan Haidt, who's written a book about how we've kind of done too much to protect children in the real world and not enough online. And this is an
Mm.
anxious generation, and kind of gets into his research about why he says that. And there's so many issues. AI is both a huge opportunity, I think, as well as obviously a potential risk, to the health and well-being of not just young people but all of us. So let's talk a little bit more to you about the experience that you say many of us have. I can relate as a man as well. Like, I'm about to go for my annual physical. I'm probably going to see the back of my doctor more than I'll see the front of him, as he goes into my chart and reads the information and tries to figure out what's happened in the last year, and how did my physical go last year, right? Like, they just don't have the time that they want to be more face to face with us and interacting. So what has the feedback been from clinicians as they learn about Conceivable and what you're doing? I have to imagine that they feel some sense of envy that the AI can spend, many many hours a day one on one with a patient and kind of talking to them. What's the feedback been like?
Typically, for OB-GYNs and family practice physicians, they're elated. They're like, oh my gosh, if my patient could have all of this help every single day, it will really help them to improve their health. And especially for fertility, what's nice is that when people want to get pregnant, they're very disciplined. They have a kind of discipline that no other patient will have because the carrot is very strong. And so if you just break it down and you make it so easy for them, they will do it. They'll do it even if it's hard. And so you can have them getting really quick progress. And then the physicians are seeing that their patients are, for the first time, instead of just tracking and reporting, they're actually making progress. We're actually working on designing a new dashboard just for doctors, so that either patients can have that emailed to their physician, or just when they're there, they will really show, like, this is what's been going on with this patient over the last year, but in data that's meaningful to them.
Mm,
Right, that really points out, like, hey, this is what their blood sugar's been doing over the month, this is what's been happening to their energy, lot of emotional stuff that's going on. So instead of that experience where the doctor has their back to you, which I despise, I think that is just like, it would be better to send a robot in. I literally would prefer an AI robot to come in and do the intake and look at all of that, and then give a one-sentence summary to the doctor. She needs a pap smear, annual exam, nothing's changed. And then the doctor
yeah,
can be like, "Hey, what else has been going on? How's your family? Shake my hand," you know what I mean? Like, that is a
I
place
know.
where AI should definitely be. We should have robots for that.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things we work on here at Productive Edge. Kind of our day job is trying to help with that summary, right? To pull the information across, several different screens into one cohesive view that can give you the rundown. And a clinician can then obviously double click into any of that to get more detail, or to see the trend, or to whatever they want to drill deeper into. But I think
Mhm.
there's so much pressure on clinicians to come in and be that kind of executive summary writer of the person's life, right? By going to multiple tabs. It's a software design problem, right? It's not like something that we can overcome. And that's, clearly what you're working on in your product too, right? Is like, let's bring together that information so that when we do have time with the human clinician, we can spend it well, show them, tell them a story, right? And kind of give them that view of the information. So yeah, it's all stuff that we can solve for. It's just, for whatever reason, the current state of affairs. And I think that I'm going to guess that you have a lot of empathy for doctors as well as the patients and your users, because everyone, no one got into medicine or health because they wanted to use a computer all day, right? They wanted to care for people, and the current state of affairs and the level of burnout and all of that stuff is just, it's all just a shame, and obviously something that many of us are focused on improving.
I think, I think that also that, they didn't become doctors to sit behind a computer. Most of them, I mean, some of them do it because they love medicine, but most of them, want to serve. Right? And that means, like, relating and interacting with so much of what we do as doctors is the interaction that we have with them. We have clear clinical data on, it's like bedside manner actually does make a difference, which we lose with AI, but we gain some other things. So it's all a trade-off. But I agree
Yeah.
that, how can we, here's the thing that I think we need to solve with AI is elections. I don't know if we can run the World Bank on an app. I'm 100% sure we could build a completely secure tool that everybody could vote from their phone, and it would just save billions of dollars. Like,
Yeah.
but that would
Well,
allow actually everyone to vote, and so then that wouldn't be a win.
yeah, I think, well, you bring up a point, which is trust, right? So trust in these tools is an incredibly important feature. There was just an article last week, as we record this in the middle of October here, 2025, where Google, as part of their rollout of their new health benefits for the year, were, at first it seemed like they were requiring, but they later clarified that it wasn't a requirement, that people share their health history with a third-party AI app that would then help match them to the right plan for them and their family, if they have a family or if they're single, whatever. That's a hard part of annual enrollment, right? It's like you have this menu and there's been a revision and you're not sure which plan and you're trying to look back. Well, if I'd had that plan for this, right? So Google went through a big thing. And so think about Google's employee base. They literally work in tech for a company that's creating, Google Gemini, one of the biggest AI platforms in the world, and they had trust issues with handing over their health data. So to me, it's just a symptom of, if they're having that kind of concern, then people overall are going to have huge concerns about the data, the privacy, the trust. How do you think about that for Conceivable? Because especially reproductive data is incredibly sensitive. Women's health data is very sensitive. How do you think about privacy and safety for your users?
I don't really think of anything else practically apart from the outcome of the app. I'm obsessed with safety and privacy, especially given that, like, you know, um, in Project 2025, they're, talking about restricting women's movement between states to get illegal abortions and things like that. So really, it's really a life or death issue. And we know that there have been data breaches on almost every fertility and period tracker, many of them intentional sales of data. So with our next round of funding, we're going to raise enough money and build our own language model so that we can just ensure that if there's any leak, it's our fault, not because somebody broke into it or, whatever. It's just really privacy and protecting the integrity of the data, especially if we're working with individuals from age 7 until they die. The amount of information that in that person's database, is very robust, and we can't run any risk of that information being put in the hands of people that we don't want.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've talked about just that piece about kind of building your own language model to be able to host and store and secure all of that data. You've also talked about kind of building out for other phases of women's reproductive life and kind of those things. Where else are you thinking about Conceivable going in the future? What else is kind of on the roadmap, or are you thinking about and kind of exploring as possibilities for the future?
I'm really working on 10x thinking, so I'm going to say carefully what I think. So essentially, with the current Conceivable for Women's Health, the node, which is the back end software that runs the fertility part, will be able to switch right between pre-period, all through this. I don't know if in my life I'm going to have enough time to get all that finished and executed and all the research that I want to do, but certainly we'll start partnering. Like, there'll be opportunities to license that node for chronic illness, because in Chinese medicine, you're never treating anything, you're always treating everything, which is why we can move between those nodes very easily. So like MS or diabetes, any chronic illness, asthma, heart disease, you could run a program similar to what Conceivable, like almost identically, just with different content. Like all the AIs would be trained to talk about heart disease or to talk about MS or talk about those kinds of issues, and there'd be different features in those apps. But certainly licensing that will be an opportunity for us. I don't know, media company. I think content is really important, and especially in the country, like, there's basically now a monopoly on social media. So and a lot of those social media platforms are now restricting the types of content that people can produce. There's free speech is really inhibited. So who knows? I might start a media company. I have 500,000 followers on social media. So see if we can figure out a way to allow freedom of speech across the planet, so that, I just feel like it's really important for world peace. Seeing other people in other countries, so many people in the US have never even left their state.
Mm.
How can you have empathy for anything else that's happening in the world if you've never even seen, except for like a picture in National Geographic when you were 7 years old, but really seeing what's happening, hearing people's voices, I think that really helps to build empathy. So who knows if that'll still be a problem when I have the bandwidth to do it.
Yeah. Well, so many amazing opportunities, and I do think it's such a great point about taking the work that you're doing around women's health and applying the same uh, solutions or kind of the framework to other chronic care conditions where people need that level of support. There's another story from now it's probably a month or two ago about Emory University doing a study that they presented to the American Heart Association conference about helping seniors take their blood pressure readings at home. So in
Mm.
between those visits, right, and having an AI agent call on the phone, be patient, helpful, understanding, talking them through the steps, getting the reading once they have it and putting it into their chart, escalating anything that needs to go to a human clinician for follow-up, right? There's so much opportunity to fill those gaps, regardless of what kind of care needs people have. That being that 24/7 helper that can provide the support and the empathy and the understanding and the clinical expertise when it's called for, right? But there is such an opportunity in health, right, to kind of better support people. That it's just and to do it for a reasonable cost, right? Like you talked about the cost of your monthly subscription, and like it doesn't take a lot for people to get their money's worth from that, based on what I've heard today. So I think it's admirable work that you and the team are doing at Conceivable. Um, so well done, Kirsten.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and wrap up our episode for today. So this has been a great conversation with Kirsten Kchmer, founder and CEO of Conceivable, a company rethinking how women's health can be supported through AI and real-world data. If you want to learn more, you can check out conceivable.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it or leave a quick review. Helps more people discover the stories shaping the future of healthcare. I'm Mike Moore. Thanks for listening to the Health Tech Edge. We'll see you next time.